One of the most unreported aspects of the political press is how often political reporters move in and out of left-wing organizations and institutes, and how often they rely on information from left-wing operations to cover the news. Daniel Dale, for example, at CNN, he's the presidential fact checker. He has not fact checked Joe Biden in months and months, and yet still regularly fact checks Donald Trump. It is a double standard. Dale came from, of course, the left, and they're happy to have him. And you have a lot of reporters today who are circulating a story from ProPublica, which is a left-wing political outfit. ProPublica is funded by the Sadler Foundation and Demand Justice. They are left-wing groups. The Democrats call them dark money groups. We don't know where they get their money. They're in the shadows. And the Democrats hate dark money groups if they help the right, but they tend to turn a blind eye towards this. ProPublica is a left-wing outfit, and it has now engaged in a series of attacks, misleading attacks, on conservative members of the Supreme Court. They started with Clarence Thomas, and they've now moved to Samuel Alito. They are not touching the liberal members of the court, the progressive wing. It's not that they haven't done anything that ProPublica could go after them on. It's that they choose to turn a blind eye to it. Justice Breyer was notorious for taking private flights from billionaires. Justices Kagan and Sotomayor and Ginsburg also did. They've taken hotel suites. They've taken major awards with large cash prizes. They've been wined and dined by billionaires on yachts. ProPublica chooses to ignore them and act like none of this has happened. And yet it has. Their focus on Samuel Alito is over a relationship with Paul Singer. Singer is a billionaire. He leans Republican. He's socially liberal. He had a case before the United States Supreme Court. You may have heard of it, Obergefell. It's the case that supported gay marriage. He, Paul Singer, helped fund the case, advocated for gay marriage, and Samuel Alito was on the opposing side. ProPublica doesn't take that on. What ProPublica does is it takes on a case where Samuel Alito ruled in favor of a business for which you could not research and see that Paul Singer was involved unless you really dug deep. In other words, there was no way for Samuel Alito to know that Paul Singer had a business interest in a company with business before the United States Supreme Court. The one time Paul Singer explicitly had business before the Supreme Court, Alito voted against his interest, but it doesn't matter because 15 years ago, Sam Alito took a fishing trip with Antonin Scalia and several other people to Alaska. And he went on Paul Singer's jet. Had he gone commercial, and Samuel Alito would have had to have a U.S. Marshal travel with him at taxpayer expense. But he was led to believe, a spare seat on this plane. It was going to go unused unless he wanted it, so he took it. I would take it too, so would you. ProPublica wants you to believe he stayed at a very fancy resort. Now, the place he stayed is apparently now a fancy resort. It was bought and renovated 15 years ago. It was, in Sam Alito's words, very rustic. If you look at the old pictures, place was very rustic. You expect Jack Nicholson to be running through wielding an axe and asking, "Here's Johnny," and whatnot. The place looked like something out of The Shining. And now it seems to be a very nicely renovated place, but it was not back then. 15 years ago, it wasn't. Now, what's so notable about this is 14 years ago, Sam Alito, in a speech before 1,000 people and a bunch of reporters, mentioned the trip to Alaska and the details about Singer. No reporter ever bothered to complain. No reporter ever made a stink about it. No reporter ever dug in. But 15 years later, in the run-up to the anniversary of the Dobbs decision written by Sam Alito, suddenly ProPublica is outraged that Sam Alito 15 years ago had this trip. And they want you to believe that Sam Alito should have recused himself from cases because Paul Singer was involved in the cases, except Alito had no knowledge of it. So now the left-wing spin on this has been a subtle moving of goalposts. It's gone from this was a clear conflict of interest to, well, it's the appearance of impropriety. Yes, laid out the way ProPublica lays it out, that's exactly what they want you to conclude, the appearance of impropriety. It's not that he did something wrong, it's that it looks bad. It besmirches the reputation of the court. Laid out by ProPublica, yes. But if you actually knew the facts, that yes, Paul Singer had a financial interest in a company with business before the court, but it was an undisclosed financial interest. There's no way anyone on the court could have known. And in fact, the court devotes resources to try to find conflicts of interest. There was no way to find this out without diving deep into SEC filings of a limited liability partnership. And they don't do that for anybody. There's not even an appearance of impropriety here except the way ProPublica decided to shape the case and the story. And now you've got a bunch of liberals out there. I can't believe he did this. This besmirches the court. And they've ignored the left. They've ignored Kagan, Sotomayor, Breyer. They've certainly ignored St. Ginsburg, who notoriously flew around the world with billionaires. Not going to besmirch her reputation. This is all about discrediting the conservatives on the court. And unfortunately, to some degree, it looks like it may work with people like Kavanaugh and Roberts, who are concerned about the public image of the court. So the left can get away with roughing the refs, and the refs respond to give the left things they want so that you can't besmirch their reputation. I guarantee you that Alabama redistricting case had a lot to do with stuff like this. They decided they needed to give the left a win on that redistricting case so they can't say, oh, the court, it's completely biased. It's completely broken. It's completely conservative. No, in fact, Politico yesterday had a story out that, surprise, surprise, the court is not nearly as ideologically aligned this year. In fact, Sotomayor has been in the majority more than Sam Alito. But they do not care. They do not care because 5 members of the Supreme Court got rid of Roe versus Wade. And abortion is a sacrament to the secular left religion. Human sacrifice has been a component of pretty much every pagan religion on the planet in history, including the left. And the Supreme Court obstructed their ability to engage in child sacrifice to Mother Earth, so they must be punished, and the court must be discredited, and the court must be maligned. And they're doing it to Thomas. They've moved on from Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas has a rich friend who's very generous with his time and money with all of his friends, not just Clarence Thomas, and he's never had business before the United States Supreme Court, but somehow it's the appearance of impropriety. There's not even an appearance of impropriety. The dude has literally never had business before the United States Supreme Court. He's just a friend of Clarence Thomas's. They'll come for Amy Coney Barrett soon. They've already come for the Catholic Church and the organization she's a part of. They'll come back to her. They'll go for Neil Gorsuch. They've already come for Brett Kavanaugh. They'll even come for John Roberts, who thinks he might be spared by being clever in the way he splits the baby on the Supreme Court, his very Solomon-esque decisions. They'll come for him too. Hell hath no fury like a progressive scorned. This is a hit job from the left. And the other notable aspect of this that you got to pay attention to is how many members of the mainstream press corps have embraced ProPublica. Now, Sam Alito released a response. He knew the hit job was coming, and in the Wall Street Journal editorial page, he outlined what their attacks were and the truth. Many of the reporters who are citing the ProPublica story as proof that something is wrong with the Supreme Court have flat out refused to link to Sam Alito's defense. They don't even acknowledge that it exists. They take ProPublica at face value. Notice how these same reporters, if a report comes out of Fox News, they treat it critically. The conservative-leaning Fox News says this. What's the real truth? But ProPublica is a left-wing operator, and they just accept it as gospel truth. They don't even question the motives. They don't question the truth. They don't question the veracity. They don't question the shading. The press has become the enemy of the people. The press has become an enemy, not just of the right, but of the truth. The press is an enemy of the truth. They're all about the narrative, and the narrative must be that the Supreme Court is broken and must be discredited and needs to be packed with progressives to undo the damage of the right. They don't care about the truth. They don't care about the story. They care about the narrative. And along comes a left-wing public interest site funded by left-wing dark money interests to attack them, attack the conservatives on the court, and the media eats it up because the media is as complicit as ProPublica in trying to undermine faith in an institution of government that no longer serves the interests of progressives the way they want. Progressives believe government must give it what it wants, and if it doesn't, it must be destroyed and remade in their image, and now they will try to do that to the Supreme Court. They can't to the Senate, which they've tried very hard to make illegitimate, but they'll do their best to force the Supreme Court to come their way. They will bully them, cajole them, and if they could get their way, they would pack the court. And the media will let this happen because they are the enemy of the people.